ETFs will make XRP's price go up significantly. Well, or will they? Everyone's wondering how a possible ETF announcement could affect XRP's price, and more importantly, why current ETFs are not really moving the price. And by the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding of the difference between existing ETFs and the potential future ones that could drive XRP's price much higher. Most importantly, I'll share where we can expect the price to move to after the supply shock and the FOMO is triggered by these ETFs. How will ETFs affect XRP's price? That's the question that everyone's asking me right now. And that's why I created this video. I wanted to explain the ETFs we currently have that are not affecting the price and how spot ETFs create a completely different supply dynamic, that the combination of this with institutional demand and retail FOMO could create a supply shock that drives XRP's price to the highest levels that most people think are completely impossible. So everybody's talking about ETF approvals, but they don't understand the fundamental difference between what we have now and what's coming. Current XRP ETFs are futures ETFs, and what we're looking for are the coming spot ETFs. We already have the futures, right? They're already trading. We have 2 times long XXRP ETFs. And with all of them in total, I think we have about $240 million invested in these futures ETFs. So Volatility Shares launched their XRPI futures ETF in May of 2025 on NASDAQ. You got futures ETFs. Well, they don't actually buy the XRP. They have a rolling futures contracts. Okay, so there's no actual impact on XRP's supply because they never take possession of the underlying asset. We've talked to our partners that trade futures, and there's some situations where I want them to take possession of the underlying asset and they can't physically do it. So the difference here is spot ETFs are going to have to actually buy and accumulate the XRP. They're going to have to hold the tokens and back every share issued in the ratio that they are mandated in their S1. Okay, so futures ETFs really haven't moved the price for XRP, but they are a precursor for what's to come. The SEC wants futures markets in order and operation for at least 6 months before they allow the spot ETFs to be approved. So we need them, but they're not going to do a whole lot for the price in the meantime. We saw this for Bitcoin. Bitcoin futures were live for a long time, but when we got the spot ETFs for Bitcoin and we got these treasury companies for Bitcoin, that's when we saw the huge move, and it was at a high even before the halving in this last cycle. So fund managers buy futures contracts and not really these ETF tokens. And so that's why, again, it's not moving the price. Most futures contracts get rolled over before their expiration. And again, they're not taking the actual XRP. They're not taking delivery of it like you would for gold on the COMEX, which many people are doing right now because they don't believe all the gold is actually there. So even if they did take delivery, they would just sell it back, right? There's zero constraint on the XRP supply and the demand dynamics that would cause XRP to go up. Now, we have started to see some accumulation of XRP through TWAP and VWAP by these large institutions that have filed for these ETFs, these spot ETFs, but they haven't been approved yet. And we don't have huge demand from retail having that listed on NASDAQ or other exchanges to be able to get an allocation. We even have ETPs in other jurisdictions, but US are the largest capital markets. And again, because we've seen it with Bitcoin, we've seen it with ETH, I think it's going to also affect XRP's price substantially when these do get rolled out. So that's really the difference here. Spot ETFs have authorized participants that must buy the actual XRP from the exchanges or OTC desks or dark pools. And every dollar of inflows requires purchasing XRP tokens that get locked up. They're held in custody. They're with Coinbase or Anchorage or another custodian that the issuers of the ETFs are using. The ETF shares are backed in whatever ratio for the XRP holdings that they need. Some of these are as low as like 5 XRP per share, all the way up to like 50 XRP per share that they're going to be issuing. So this creates a permanent removal for this XRP from the circulating supply. Unless, you had a situation where a bunch of people divest and they have to sell their shares in the ETF, they would then sell, the XRP that they bought back onto the market. But as long as people are holding those ETF shares, that XRP is going to be removed from the circulating supply. So the same mechanics that contributed to Bitcoin's rise, though over a longer timeline, should be realized in a much shorter time frame for XRP. We've already seen the most aggressive move in liquidity and futures of any other asset that's been issued. It's up to $1 billion on the CME after just 3 months of trading. That's the fastest any asset has gotten to that level. And I don't think the ETFs are going to be any different. Okay. So there's currently 8, well, actually more than 8 spot ETF applications pending with the SEC right now on their final decision for the approvals of these spot ETFs. And it's looking like somewhere between October 18th and the 25th of 2025 this year. Now, we did just have Franklin Templeton get punted to November. You got Bitwise, you got Grayscale, you got 21 Shares, you got Canary Capital, you got Wisdom Tree. All of these have filed applications for these spot ETFs. You got Polymarket at like a 94% approval rating at this point. They believe that the odds on it are very high that they're actually going to get approved. And again, with the DTCC listing the other day, I think that that's